Transfer portal, we're going to talk about actually more before the end of the show. How is the transfer portal impacting college football, though? And I specifically want to ask you, could we be on the precipice of finding a new way to inject one or two more Tier 1 programs into college football? Because right now it's very popular to ask about Tier 1 programs. So I talk about this from time to time. Very quickly, my qualifiers on this, I consider you a Tier 1 program if you are top 5 caliber in results on the field, obviously, in recruiting, in engagement and investment, your coaching staff, your roster, those things, you either need to be at or inside of top 5 caliber. Now, you could mix and match there. You could be like the 7th best roster in the country, but have the best staff in the country. You understand, though, you need to be floating around that range. And right now, Alabama's there, Ohio State's there, Clemson's there. Understand all the while, there is distance within Tier 1. I can't make a Tier 0. So within Tier 1, there are little sub-tiers, if you will. I mean, Alabama's on their own level. But I'm putting Ohio State in there. I put Clemson in there. I put Oklahoma in there. I had some arguments with people back and forth today. I put a poll out on Twitter, actually. Do you consider Oklahoma a Tier 1? Now, I understand some of you just flat out can't consider a team a Tier 1 program unless they either win a national title or play for a national title. If that's the way you look at it, that's fine. I'm not here to tell you how to define your tiers. I'm just telling you I am judging it from this point moving forward, and I'm telling you Oklahoma is a Tier 1 program for me. Georgia, right on the precipice. Oklahoma, if you don't consider them there, they got to be right on the precipice. That's not what I'm asking you, though. I'm not even asking you who's there right now. I'm telling you, do me a favor, define your Tier 1, then start to define your Tier 2, and even the top of Tier 3, and then I want you to tell me, who is the next team? Which 2, maybe, or 3, could be the next ones to elevate into Tier 1 status, and how could it happen? Because right now, it's popular to suggest that Tier 1 is closed. It's this closed club. For some reason, the college football playoff has built a huge wrought iron gate around Tier 1, and no one can get in or out. It's like people forget that in 2019, the LSU Tigers won a national title. So that's BS. I dismiss that entirely. But the next most popular question is, okay, well then who's going to be next? That is a good question, valid. And I want to suggest something to you. Here's what we don't have. Transfer portal era, it's still pretty new. So what we don't have is, we don't have definitives, we don't have trends that we could look at yet, we don't have conclusions, we don't have winners or losers of the transfer portal era. Any given offseason, I can tell you right now, Oklahoma won this offseason in the transfer portal. Florida, up until about 15 minutes ago, it felt like they had. Now I don't know so much anymore. They still had a good offseason. But we don't know long term. Like, we need 5, 10 years before we really look back and see who is consistently doing things this way or that way. But I do want to look at this from a very macro point of view. The one thing that could impact this that I don't necessarily know that people are looking at is, I think the transfer portal is not so much going to have an impact on Tier 1 itself. The ones that are already there are going to stay there. The ones that are there are probably not going anywhere because of the transfer portal. But I'm working out with a buddy in the gym the other day, and we were kind of tossing this idea around. The more we did, the more it made sense. It could be that Tier 2 is far more impacted by the transfer portal. And what I mean is this. There are programs already in the picture. Oregon, Texas A&M, Georgia, if you don't put them in Tier 1, Georgia's there, Florida, Notre Dame, like those are the kinds of programs. I know there are differing policies on how to handle transfers out there, but those programs, they're already in the picture. They're not getting run out of a building 56-10 if they play the elite teams, hopefully. My point is they're in the conversation. They're not terrible. They're not sucking water through a garden hose. And so they're already in the picture. What if they end up with, top 10 averaging recruiting classes, but then they also mix in that formula year over year, the ability to go find 2 to 5 elite transfers. That whatever the art is for working the transfer portal, they perfect it. Because I want you to think about what separates Tier 1 and Tier 2. The Tier 1s, everyone says all the time, how many times have you heard this sentence? Tier 1 programs do not rebuild, they just reload. You hear it all the time. If you're breathing, you hear people say that. The Tier 2 programs, they're still really good, but there are more glaring attrition-related holes on any given Tier 2 roster entering a season. At Alabama, they don't have this problem because all their true freshmen are studs. So at Alabama, you have learned to just ignore returning starters, number of returning snaps. You don't even know the names. You just assume they're going to be good. Ditto at Clemson, ditto at Ohio State. But at other programs, you don't think like that. it does matter at other programs. Well, I want you to think about potentially that gap, someone figuring out how to erase it by using the transfer portal. Because if you could shave that disadvantage you have relative to the Tier 1s, if you're Mario Cristobal at Oregon, if you're Jimbo Fisher at Texas A&M, you view yourself in Tier 2, but it still hurts you when you lose a couple of defensive linemen. You're not operating at a championship caliber tier the next year. All of a sudden you'd be able to fix that by getting some stud transfer in from Akron that just blew everyone away and exceeded expectation. We got a kid at Utah that wants to get himself a taste of SEC football. Bring him to College Station. Well, quickly we can replenish, and all of a sudden we don't have to rebuild either. All of a sudden we can leverage that transfer portal, and now we get to find out what it feels like to be cool, just be a reloader. That could be the biggest impact. So I don't know that there's room for 5 or 6 Tier 1 programs. In fact, I can tell you there's not. But it could give you an added benefit and could give you a little leg up if you're a Tier 2. And I think it could disproportionately positively impact Tier 2 programs. So while everyone out there is complaining about the haves and the have-nots, try and find ways in the sport like this, I think, for example, where you could end up injecting more parity. That precious parity you guys care so much about, you could end up injecting some of it here by way of the transfer portal.